Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the Pharmacy Benefits Management Institute. We'd like to welcome you to today's live broadcast. It's entitled The Growth of AI and Digital Transformation in the PBM Landscape. My name's Ron Southwick. I'm the editor of Chief Healthcare Executive, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. The program is presented by MJH Life Sciences, a parent company of PBMI. Since 1995, PBMI has provided valuable research, education, and a forum to help share best practices and drive changes that improve pharmacy benefits and help control costs. Now, I do want to mention the recording of today's webinar is going to be available for on-demand viewing at pbmi.com. You'll be able to find it under the webinar section. The slides presented during today's webinar will also be available as well. This webinar is presented by EXL Health and will feature experts in the fields of PBM pharmacy operations, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and automation. We'll be highlighting how the pharmacy benefit management landscape can utilize the latest advances in digital technology and AI to help cut costs, improve performance, and ensure members receive the best possible experience. This webinar will highlight the benefits of incorporating cutting-edge conversational artificial intelligence capabilities. Presenters will focus on how AI-infused customer experiences have the power to not just automate the PBM consumer function, but to transform it completely. During this webinar, we'll discuss how to identify specific types of machine learning modules for healthcare and PBMs, learn about the growth and effectiveness of digital and artificial intelligence in healthcare and the PBM market, and how to leverage digital AI technologies to address common issues. Now, just a few more notes before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive. We encourage you to submit your questions. We'd like to hear from you. You can do that using the Q&A tool underneath the video player, and we'll take about the last 10 or 15 minutes of the program to answer audience questions. If you're having any problems viewing or hearing the webcast, click on the support icon, and we will do our best to help you with your issues. And now it's time to welcome our presenters. We'd like to welcome Amy Sayers, the Senior Assistant Vice President of Pharmacy Services at EXL Health, and Chris Stebbins, Vice President of Digital Transformation at EXL Health. We'll begin with Amy. Amy, take it away.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate your time today and everyone who was able to join us today. Slide deck up. Just want to make sure that we are seeing that. Folks are seeing that. Okay, let's roll with it then. Appreciate it. So we're going to talk through a bit of a journey that we're going to take you on today, starting from when our own industry started out with paper scripts and moving through all the way through now to our own digital AI platform that how pharmacy really has evolved over time. So when I think about my own experiences with retail pharmacy and getting my own prescriptions filled. Today, when I call my mail order pharmacy and I get my prescriptions moving forward, I'm able to interact with an IVR. So I press 1, I can press 2 for my different pickup times. And that works great for me as a consumer in order to get me on throughout my day. What I cannot do, however, is ask any questions. I can't ask questions about cost. I can't ask questions about maybe a negative interaction that I had with my medication. I can't ask any questions about if I'm having any additional medications. Should these be moving together? Should I be taking both of them at the same time? So without that additional interaction, I still have to go back and place my phone call in. And then therefore that's just driving up calls for the broader organization. So what you're going to hear about is an ability and the thought about how we can continue to take our industry steps further with it, and how digital AI could actually help me interact with those various questions that I just laid out. So in nudging me to get additional prescriptions, what if that digital AI could get me cost savings? What if that additional AI could present other opportunities for me, maybe to close out a care gap within the industry? And so Chris is going to kind of walk us through some of that future vision on how that could, our landscape could continue to move forward. So Chris, I'm going to hand it to you.
Oh, absolutely. And I like how you position that, Amy. The thing that strikes me is all of those different topics and opportunities for PBMs and really healthcare at large to leverage digital assistance and cognitive AI. And we're going to talk about two things today, two concepts: the interactive AI, but then also intelligent document processing and natural language processing. But the thing that strikes me out of all of that is, how do we complete a patient journey? How do we create a complete patient journey and automate that to the extent that we're not just functional like the old legacy thinking around IVR programs, but how do we actually get the patient to acknowledge they've had a complete journey, they're satisfied with their journey? And this has been one of the interesting nuances in AI and digital assistants in particular that we're going to talk about first. Is it's not enough just to be intelligent. You have to have sentiment analysis. You have to understand your patient, and you have to have a human-like interaction. So let's talk about digital agents first. Go ahead and go to the next slide there, Casey, and let me know when we're on slide 4. But there's a few key attributes that we should really be thinking about when we think about what is a digital agent and how can it serve me. So first, let's talk about what it is. A digital agent is a cognitive interactive AI system that is trained to engage. It's trained either telephonically, through text, through emails. There's always an engagement with your patients, with your customers, with your associates, with your providers. There's lots of different touch points where you and your partners and your customers all have to connect. And one of the great things about that is if you really understand your workflow and can articulate where your decision points are, a digital agent can really help you here because it can take a more probabilistic approach to not just analyzing the workflow and what steps need to be taken, but how to optimize and improve that along the way. So the key attributes we're looking for out of a good digital agent would be, first and foremost, domain contextual interaction. That is correct ontologies. Another way to say it is you have to understand, and your digital assistants, your AI models have to understand the context. One of the examples I like to use is I-95, a diagnosis code for hypotension, not the interstate you may be taking to work. Now, for you and I, that's very well understood. But for a digital agent or any sort of cognitive AI system, this is extremely important because it's going to dictate the success of your patient's journey. If your patient is using a vernacular or terminology, or perhaps doesn't understand how to properly enunciate a drug name, for example, you have to have enough flexibility and intelligence to be able to interpret and still get to the right conclusion at a high level of accuracy. So that's first and foremost. Domain contextually accurate interactions. Second is human-like interactions. When I was growing up, and many of you, we had IVR lines, right? You press 1, you get a response, or sometimes you get the very fun agents where it's still an IVR system, but you have to scream very clearly the words you're saying at the phone to get to the right endpoint. And that's not human-like at all. The minute you've gotten into that type of interaction, you've put your entire patient journey and their satisfaction at risk. So it's very important that as we think about, especially telephonic agents, right? It's very important that there's a human-like element to it that isn't just sounding human, but it is analyzing sentiment. And this is the other layer of the intelligence that goes into these models. To be able to understand, is my participant, is my customer, is my patient happy? Are they getting annoyed? This is a measurable concept. And many of us are held to standards of patient satisfaction, your NPS scores. There are HEDIS requirements around this, around measuring this. And it's very important that you have a digital assistant or digital cognitive AI systems that contemplate and use the mechanisms for analyzing sentiment with your patients, with your customers. Thirdly, you have to have what we would call advanced recall. That's a fancy way of saying a digital assistant that is capable of having a conversation across multiple topics. And here's a good example. You may have providers that either fax or telephonically call about a prior authorization. Let's talk about the telephonic component because this is where it can get really fun. If I'm a provider, I may call in and ask for the status of prior authorization. And in the same conversation, I may change my mind and decide to submit a different authorization for a different patient. And then I may want to jump yet again to a third patient. Someone just walked into my office and gave me the information I need, and I'm on the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and submit for a different authorization of a different patient. Imagine going through that with a legacy IVR system, right? You have to go back through and hit the right buttons or scream the right words at the phone. A good quality digital assistant will be able to keep up with you and demonstrate. And this is something we should always be aware of and demanding of our digital assistants, that they're capable of having that multi-rooted conversation. They can actually keep up with a human, right? To the extent that we've trained them. Now, obviously, if the provider is calling in to initiate a prior authorization and then they want to order a pizza, that's not what we're talking about. They're two very different things, right? But training the AI to be human-like and analyzing sentiment to be that human-like digital assistant, to have the domain contextually accurate vernacular and understanding of what it is we're talking about when we say the words we're saying. and then be able to pull that all together into a very complex conversation. And this is where you really start to realize the distinction between the prior state of what I call legacy IVR systems and future state, which is interactive AI-driven systems. And then lastly, this is table stakes for any good digital assistant solution. It has to be omni-channel and multilingual. If you're going to have a complete patient journey, your patients are going to have different vehicles to take that journey. Some may prefer, based on age, geography, any number of preferences, they may prefer a telephonic engagement. Many may prefer a text engagement. I'm one of those people. If you send me a text, I'm much more likely to respond, even if I know it's an automated system. And I think we've seen some of these out in the wild today. But the point is to be able to communicate along all possible lines, emails, SMS, what have you. And then, of course, multilingual. It's a big, big world out there. We have patients of all walks of life. If your patients all can't complete their patient journey, then we haven't completed our work. So that's in a nutshell. When we're talking about a digital agent, which is what we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking today about, this is an interactive cognitive AI system. This is the principle of going from the old school, the legacy thinking of what's very binary and Boolean, not very personal interactions, to really meaningful interactions. And the last thing I'll say before we move off to the next slide here is Amy hit on a few points where there's opportunities in the PBM space. And I try to weave some of those into this segment. But the thing to keep in mind is it's not just receiving the communication, it's also initiating the communication. And this is another great distinction and a reason to move to more AI-driven models, because if you're going to complete a patient journey and you realize through your data and analytics of your data that you have patients of certain classes that perhaps need to be made aware of their networks have changed, pricing has changed, a refill has had an issue, or it's succeeded and they have to go get their refill. These are all things that can be proactive. And so then you go from efficient service of your patient to complete that patient journey to extraordinary service of your patient, because now you're engaging that patient, and through that you get the opportunity to nudge and influence and push for medication adherence and a lot of other great outcomes that can come from that. But again, to bring it all together, a digital agent is the solution to creating a complete patient journey, inbound, outbound, where the patient lives, where the patient is, where your providers are, and meet them where they are to help them get over the bridges that they have to cross for their journey. I'm going to pause there for a minute. Go ahead.
Chris, it sounds like too that digital agents are really part of the teams. Like they're integrated within our teams as we think about them. So it's not a human or an agent, but it's really human plus an agent. Is that a good way to think of those?
That's a fantastic characterization. I really like that. And here's why. Oftentimes people take the misnomer that a digital agent replaces a human in some way. And that's really not the case. The digital agent is your virtual workforce, your digital workforce. And we see out in industries today where management and actually business users will own the function of managing the performance of the digital agent, making changes in low-code environments to guide digital agents to respond differently in certain circumstances. It does not necessarily replace workforce. In fact, it enables your existing live agents to operate at a higher level or top of their license and take as much of the work that can be automated and digitized and take that off their plate. So it's very much a digital workforce. And the current thinking is really that this concept of digital employees, digital agents, it's going to dramatically grow in the years to come, but it will become basically table stakes for your workforce. It will be an essential component of your core.
Love it. Let's move on. And Chris, let's kind of help our audience, those that are joining with us today, kind of think through or see how we've approached in the past with some of our partner clients, kind of where to begin, because there's a lot, right? We can have a digital agent that can be working with our members, that can be working with patients. They can be taking calls. They can be pushing messages out. They can be receiving them. They can also pivot and work with providers, which is a huge part as well within our industry, that we want to ensure that our providers, that are pharmacists, that are working within our retail and our hospital settings, that they're getting all the support and all the information that they need. So it probably can feel a little bit overwhelming as to where do we even start to begin with a assessment within our organization about how do we even start to begin that. So can you help us kind of think through how do we begin within an organization? How do we start with what is our best entree point for thinking about where a digital agent might fit in really well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great topic. And results will vary. Let's just be blunt about that. But the way to think about this, what I often encourage organizations to do is first assess what's your appetite for innovation, because it's okay to play between two tracks of efficiency. You have ROI savings that you want to hit and yield, and that's a consequence of time savings and reductions in cycle times and improving efficiency. But there's also a great argument to be had for, let's also go for extraordinary. Let's innovate. Let's truly build. And so what we like to position it for clients is to say, let's understand both the need for scale and complexity. And I think that's the chart we have on the page here. And it's essentially taking the various workflows and engagement types that you have to manage today. And to our best estimate, let's plot out, okay, where do we think the most complex call flows are and what's really going to delight our customers? And then the decision is obviously, how much effort and time will we need to train models to create a quality digital assistant who's understood that call flow and can manage that. The time to market for that, obviously, the more innovative and extraordinary you want to be, your time to value could and very well be longer. However, it's very fair and probably smart to say, I have other call flows that make up a high volume of work. So we're talking a little bit more about efficiency now. And I know we can craft the workflow and we can train models around this. This is something we understand. And because if you understand it, if your domain SMEs understand it, and we have data that supports and illustrates how that work is done, you can then train AI and ML models to build your digital agents. Or obviously this is what EXL would do. We would come in and build the digital agents around that call flow of lower complexity, but higher volume and higher impact. And oftentimes that's the preferred route because they get you to proof of value. Once you start to realize you've got real returns, real savings that can be generated, you can then afford to spend a little more time thinking about the extraordinary, right? So proof of value, again, I often like to say, let's stratify out the scale and complexity. And you'll see on the slide here in the PBM space, this is our thesis we've had with many other conversations of where we think opportunities lie, and then how complex and how voluminous those opportunities may be, what the impact of those opportunities may be. So some things that come to mind for me in the PBM space, medication refills, right? While not to make it sound overly simple, that is something that we would anticipate as high volume, potentially dramatic impact, and something we should pursue in any PBM organization. Whereas you might have other more complicated call flows, such as an appeal or an escalation, a grievance, right? Well, those are very fluid conversations, and often there's a negotiating element to that. And you have to stop and say, well, to get an AI to handle all of that could be overly complex for what I want to do today. So my recommendation, try to ascertain first, where's your appetite, extraordinary or efficiency? And are you looking for proof of value, or are you really looking to disrupt and change the market? Based on your position there, that's where you take that next step of saying, let's stratify our work. Let's understand what fits where. And then we prioritize from that.
Is there opportunity too to think about how we can remove some paper from our world? So what I'm thinking about within that, knowing that about 60% of prior authorizations are done via phone and the cutting edge technology of fax machines, right, today that are still being utilized. And while there's lots of different approaches in terms of integration with EMRs and different solutions that are within the market, is a digital assistant possible to also help us remove some paper from our lives when we think about prior authorizations and phone and fax machines as well?
Yeah, 100%. Actually, we're going to get into intelligent document processing, I think, in the second half of our segment here. When we think about the telephonic area of digital agents and digital assistants, the opportunity there is just to shift your workflow into a purely telephonic or digital communication model, right? But fax is not going away. Paper is not going away. And, for good or for bad, we'd also like to think that one day that, Da Vinci and HL7 and FHIR and all that's going to come together and we'll have these beautiful API data patterns that will just follow, and that's how data will transact. But the reality is that's not where we're at. And there will be a long period of time where we're still in this quasi state of paper, digital, telephone, everything we, carrier, pigeon, smoke signal, whatever. But as it pertains to eliminating paper processes, the answer is yes. A digital assistant can support that. And in fact, what I would actually do, and we'll talk about this later, is weave together an orchestration of multiple technologies that are leveraging natural language processing to digitize that unstructured data. When I say unstructured, I mean the physical paper. Someone's got, as best as we try to make the templates people always write, and what people write is not consistent, right? So natural language processing is an element of that. That same type of ML modeling is what's used in a digital assistant to understand telephonic and voice communication. But it's the same technology, same fundamental capability that you would apply towards written and textual conversation. And so to the extent that a process is reliant on a fax to get to a PBM or a clinician or to someone, you can rethink that process by virtue of having a digital agent that can actually cover the workflow side of that equation, meaning you can change your input. And you could go fully digital. You could go to a portal. You could go telephonic. My recommendation is often be ready for everything, because that fax is still going to come and it's going to go somewhere. So the answer is yes, there's a long way around the bend. And we'll get a little bit more into that, I think, on the slides that follow here.
Perfect. Let's dig in on our next slide a bit on a case study that we've prepared for our audience today, in talking a little bit more about how the transition can be made on back to that concept of thinking about an AI as not a replacement of a human, but really how does it come in and help to support our teams? So really balancing that digital agent as well as that human agent, and building off of that idea and the digital agent working on that more lower complex cases to really allow for our teams to apply their expertise and skill set on more of those higher level cases. So let's walk through a little bit, and Chris, I'll turn it back to you to walk through a little bit on our case study here that we prepared on what was our current state with our group, and then how we were able to impact that.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the call out I'd want to make here is calling back to what do we expect of a digital agent? What are the core attributes that must be present to be successful, right? So let's just recap briefly here. You're in an omni-channel, contextually relevant, human-like, semantically, analytically capable machine. And we've stratified the workflows, and we've understood where we're going to place our bet, where we're going to adopt and adapt here. Now, the challenges that will follow are going to be first customer adoption, right? This is something that it comes up in every conversation. How do you get the customer to adopt? And in our case study here, this is with an actual client, we found right out of the gate, we were actually getting above expectations for customer adoption. We weren't really sure how customers would react. But when you have a well-tuned cognitive AI system that is able to analyze how my customer or my patient is reacting to the interaction, and mind you, this is not just telephonic, this is also through emails and through chat and text. And I'll go a little bit deeper on that. When we talk about semantic analysis in emails, chat, and text, there's two parts to this. First is the selection of the words and the phrasing that's being used to get the optimal result. And that optimal result is a response, an engagement. And so that's the first piece. But then the channel analysis is actually a very interesting component to this because, as I said earlier, different people have different preferences for the channel they want to use to communicate. That's a data point that deserves analysis. And that's what you should be doing, is understanding, am I engaging the patient not just with the right words and phrasing, but through the right channel that's going to optimize their likelihood to respond, engage, and complete their journey, complete their patient journey. So that's really important. And in our case, 60% customer adoption, we were very thrilled right off the bat to see it was that high. It means that patients and customers are calling in or engaging through SMS or engaging through email, and they're completing their journey. They're not escaping. They're not hitting zero to get to a live agent. They're completing their journey. That means the remainder of the live agents, as to your point earlier, are able to focus on much higher level tasks that do warrant, true human intervention, right? And that's the real value there. You're operating and you're getting your teams to operate at the top or peak of their license, and that's what you want. The second really important data point here, and this is something these are metrics, by the way, you should expect to see and ask for in your experience with your digital workforce, your digital agents, with these cognitive AIs, is intent recognition. It's fundamental to the success, right? If you're going to take a patient journey and complete the patient journey, you have to understand with extremely high accuracy, why is the patient calling in? I always like to go back to the example where, because we've all done this, we've had to yell very clearly the words into the phone to get where we need to go. And even then, it doesn't always work. Intent recognition is so key because it's the beginning of your patient journey. So understanding domain context, in the domain context of what we're talking about, let's use medication as an example. I want to refill my medication, right? and the patient may say the name of medication. Let's pretend they enunciate it improperly, right? Our digital agent needs to be sufficiently advanced to be able to extrapolate what that purpose is. I'm calling for a medication refill, and then take the following steps to clarify the what and the when and how to get it done, and then execute on that function. So intent recognition must have a high bar of accuracy. We've seen 99% intent recognition, which, and not to toot our own horn here, but that does mean we did very well in understanding the workflow and the different routes a call should take. And one thing I should add to this is it's not just about getting that patient to take the journey wholly with an AI. There are cases, in many cases, where you want the patient to take their journey as far as they can with your AI modules and then proceed to a live agent. And this is another area where your digital assistant should and can be trained to assist with this, which is a soft transfer or providing that data to the screen of the agent and being able to give them that 360-degree view of what's happened with that patient's interaction, what's remaining to complete their journey, what other elements should we be considering. Let's use HEDIS satisfaction as an example, right? We need to collect that information. There may be times when that the patient truly does need to drop out and go to a live agent, and that's where the digital assistant can help facilitate that. So intent recognition is so important, but also understanding when it's time to get out of a call flow or get out of an engagement flow and move to a different approach. Lastly, member authentication, right? This is not to be confused with HIPAA or any, actually getting the right information. And actually, you guys have call deflection here, so I'm looking at a different version of the model. But so I'll cover two topics. Member authentication, it really is about understanding that you've got the right data about the member, not what you're collecting from them, but the data you already have in your system, and making sure that you're relating the right person to the right data. And then call deflection, of course, this is an inherent result of everything we've just talked about. We've been able to deflect an extremely high volume of call flows that we've trained our models against. And this is something you should expect from these solutions because that's really the fundamental result that you get. It's not having your live agents deal with every single phone call. It's having satisfied patients that can quickly get through their entire journey and get the result that they want. And then go beyond that, right? Be proactive about it. So we've had great results with this. These are all elements that, again, we should expect. These are becoming table stakes in the future digital workforce. And it's just really important that we keep these things in mind so that we don't hinder ourselves by being overly zealous in the implementation of a digital assistant. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be methodical about it. And we have to demand quality results for our patients.
It's important to think within our industry as well, January 1st being such a high point for PBMs and their call centers, right? Members are getting their benefits renewed. They're often on new benefits. They may be looking for new pharmacies in their network. They may be looking for new formularies on tiers. They may be looking for cost saving measures. And even though we may have provided them information in the form of letters or open enrollment materials, those of us that have been around the industry for a while know that 1/1 is a high point for call centers. And not only are we measured on that within Medicare Advantage with the HEDIS star ratings, as you mentioned, Chris, but oftentimes with our clients, there's often performance guarantees around average handle times, around being able to respond to their membership and get them the information that they need. So thinking about that human agent working alongside that digital agent being able to increase some of those outcomes for our members and also ultimately for our clients, leading to satisfactory, not only clients, but most importantly, members, that they're getting that information that they need. And then for those that have those higher complex cases, that they're able to work within those higher places with those memberships. So that's okay. Our four-legged friends have lots of thoughts in this space too. So no problem there. Let's keep moving on then, as we're wanting to make sure that we have lots of time carved out at the end for questions from our audience. But we've spent a lot of time talking about really contact center, not only being inbound and also being able to place some of the calls in contact center, thinking about not only just for membership, but also for our providers, for our pharmacists. and how a digital agent can work within that to help with some of that call content, some of that call really lift coming into those current places. But let's broaden that thinking a little bit with our digital solution that's really hitting more than on that paper place, and really thinking about how digital could come in from a front office, middle office, as well as from a back office capability. So we spent a lot of time within the back office, but where else within our organizations is there opportunity for us, Chris, with thinking about a digital solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, actually a lot of it, about intelligent document processing and NLP, natural language processing, of course. These are both components of what are, or elements of a digital assistant, but also are functional solutions on their own. And so I'm going to get away from telephonic interaction, and I'm going to talk about what Amy just, you guys have it on the screen here, front, middle, back office, and different areas where this can help. So we're going to go a layer down and talk about paper and unstructured data, unstructured documentation. So these are the medical records, the prior authorization forms, the things that you're getting through fax or other methods you may have. You may have portals, you may even have the telephonic request. But we're really going to talk right now about natural language processing in the context of paper and workflows in paper. I'm sure nobody has to deal with this on a daily basis. Now, the first challenge you have is just the intake, the ingestion of that data and making sense of it. Now, and a lot of legacy thinking is to scan, and then you end up with a PDF, and you can read the PDF, and that's great. But really, what you want to be able to do, and these are solutions that EXL provides today, is provide an intake solution for that unstructured paper physical medium that can digitize into machine readable form. This is really important because it's not just a PDF that someone has to read. You digitize the data. And how do you do that? Going back to our domain accurate contextual ontologies, you have to be able to understand where on the prior authorization form is a name or a birth date, the social security number, the service type, the CPT codes, or the service related to the CPT code based on what was written, or the medication related to an NDC code, right? All of these things have to be considered. So these are all entities within that document that we would train natural language processing models on to identify with extremely high level of accuracy. You have to be obviously highly accurate, otherwise we've defeated the purpose here. And what you'll end up with is, if you don't demand high accuracy out of your NLP results, you're going to have participants in your workflow downstream doing double work, right? So you don't want that. So it's really important. But when you get to that state of highly accurate digitization of unstructured paper data into a machine readable form, that's the intake, that's the front office component of this. Then you can start to elaborate different ways and reimagine your workflow, different ways to approach that work, because now you can actually run algorithms and queries and models against even that data, that paper data that's come in. So one of the areas that's been very interesting for us in the clinical space is taking, and we'll use prior authorizations as an example, is taking the intake of that prior authorization, digitizing that data into a machine readable form, and then taking that next step to say, how can I relate what's been submitted from the prior authorization to the appropriate medical policy that will guide the decision making? And this is where we really start to see time savings unfold, because the clinician then can operate even faster and at a higher tier of their license, because they've got the authorization data right in front of them, highlighting exactly what the salient points, the key elements of that data or that form is, and the medical record policy that's most related, or set of policies that's most related in a navigatable way to show both of those connection points to make a faster decision. It's not to fully automate the clinician's decision-making. You don't want to do that, but it starts to unlock the potential where you can make faster decisions and then discover what decisions can actually be made in a more stochastic modeling or probabilistic approach, such as gold carding, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of providers may tell you, just gold card everybody and the problem's solved. Well, hang on, let's put some thought to that. There's actually already some principles in place that can be used for designating when a provider or service type, or even other aggregates of that data, could be considered the gold card, right? The standard or the pass-through, right? And so this is some of the opportunity that emerges when you can digitize that unstructured data with natural language processing and highly accurate and contextually domain accurate data, and relate that data to what you need to make the other half of that decision. The analytics that can now be placed embedded in the workflow there can make recommendations for the best next step. And this is where we then go into back office, where we start to talk about quality and quality management, not just call quality, but also the quality of the work that's being done by our clinicians, the quality of the data that we're receiving, what learnings can we make from that? And all of this allows you to have a feedback loop where you can say, here are the service types, the providers, or the scenarios where we believe we have a higher degree of automation potential because we can make decisions through the proper stochastic modeling based on the data we've already generated. Because remember, all of this learning and training of our machine learning models is predicated on the work that's been done. So we know what success looks like. We just haven't automated that decision point that gets you to success. And so this is how you can weave these technologies together to go from not just digital assistant, but digitized intake. Then you get into ML AI supported decision-making, right? Digitizing even the workflow itself with your clinician in partnership with your clinician, and then understanding the outcomes as part of your feedback loop to further optimize the entire workflow. So there's a lot of power you can unlock here. And, you know, I think it's probably understating it to say it's wholly natural language processing. We spend a lot of time emphasizing that, but that is really a building block and enabler to get you to that next stage where now you're truly doing AI supported decision-making and automation of things you previously might have thought weren't possible. And that's the point.
So, Chris, I know when I work with a number of the clients, there's kind of two pieces that you've always reinforced for us to think about. One is thinking about where is there heavy human interaction today, which may be an operational area, maybe a call center, kind of a variety of different places where there may be. But secondly, where is that where the teams are relying on homegrown solutions, where a lot of times that may look like Excel spreadsheets. So we're managing benefit builds through Excel spreadsheets. And then we have humans that are reviewing those Excel spreadsheets, trying to decipher, did the right group get set up with the right benefits? And of course, if that's not done correctly, there goes our call volumes increasing around 1-1, right? Because the group is not getting the right benefits that are being applied. So as we think about all the possibilities for human and AI to really partner and work together, as you said, we know the outcomes that we want to achieve because we've been doing this work for years. We've been building benefits. We've been creating lists to send out letters for members, but we shift one row and now suddenly we have a lot of big problems on our hands. So interesting to think about how our industry has really moved forward and thinks about opportunities where we could bring in digital and AI assistance, not only from outreaching for members and providers, but also thinking about our middle office and our back office and helping our operational teams to really function at their top of their license as well.
Yeah. And there's an important fact underneath all of that, which is the data management itself. Excel is a wonderful tool, but it's not for everything. It should not be the core of your business or your workflow operation, right? And so that data management component is so essential. We often find, that's the reality. We've got workflows and business units that are operating off the back of an Excel, process or Access or a lot of other, I'll consider them low-code tools. But it's not sufficient to organize your data by itself in such a way that you can really be effective in training and creating the asset that you want based on the learnings that you have. And so that's a very fundamental first step is let's be sure we're collecting your data, or as I would say differently, give me all your spreadsheets, because that's where we'll really assemble everything that we've learned. And that learning then becomes the training, and that training becomes the digitization and the automation that we're really after. So I always love to hear when someone says, hey, we've got spreadsheets coming left, right, and center. And I say, that's great. Give it to me. We need to understand that data and everything about it. And, usually what you find even in that exercise is there's elements of the workflow that your business, your customer will even say, hey, you know what? We should rethink that. We should reimagine that. But the question doesn't emerge until you start down this journey. Oftentimes, it's where you start to realize the art of the possible, and you really challenge what you thought is the way to do things from the legacy mindset. I think IVR is a good example of that. I love to pick on IVRs because they're pervasive, they're everywhere, but they're evolving. They're not evolving, they're becoming extinct, but the function is evolving into a more cognitive solution, an AI-driven solution, digital assistance. So yeah, really good call out.
Interesting how our in PBM as an industry has really evolved from paper from the doctor to the patient to the pharmacy, but that now is done via e-prescribe. And so introduce digital within that. And now it's really time for us to think about, as an industry, where else do we have opportunities not only to allow our teams to practice at the top end of their license, but also how we can continue to evolve, how we can continue to scale as organizations and serve broader our clients and also our members more broader needs, thinking about them more holistically. So fun stuff. I think we've saved lots of times for questions at the end as we're moving into this. So I am going to pause here, and I think we are moving to questions.
Okay, well, thanks to Amy, Chris, thanks so much. That was a really fascinating discussion. So I think there's certainly and we do want to remind people that there is still time to submit your questions. You still have time to submit them. All you have to do is use the Q&A tool underneath the video player. So if you'd like to get your questions in, we do have time. We're going to go to about 1 o'clock. So we will have time for you to get some questions in. So first question is kind of a two-parter. So obviously your team seems to know a lot about the development and uses of conversational AI, but are there any products your teams build or own that are out in the market now that you can talk about? And second part is, how does it relate to PBM?
Chris, do you want to start with products and I'll relate back to PBM?
Yeah, let's start with products. So we've talked a lot about digital assistants. You've probably seen the market reference to our own solution, which is the EXL solution. That is a omni-channel, multilingual digital assistant that we have fantastic success with. That's basically our flagship digital assistant model. So it gets adapted to different use cases in different industries. So we've had success in obviously healthcare, FP&A, logistics, emerging business. So the applications for these tools are far and wide. But that is definitely the solution that we typically gravitate towards first. When we talk about digital assistants, EXL, that's our brand name. So we're very well positioned there.
Couple of the relating back to PBMs, thinking about a couple of the use cases that we have for our EXL tool, again, depending on the assets that are available there at the PBM. But we do have a use case where a member is able to call in for a med refill, right? Again, handled today via IVR, except the process stops because that member needs to have a lab completed. So, and I will volunteer. I am on a maintenance med. This happens to me where I call in for my refill of my prescription, only to find out that I need to call my doctor or that my PBM needs to call my doctor, all right, and do that outreach for me. And then when I get around to calling my doctor a few days later, then I get my appointment and then I get my lab. And meanwhile, days on the calendar are going by, maybe up to a week or so are going by before I even make it into my doctor's office. So we do have some clients where they are more vertically integrated. They are able to get those schedules made with providers, and the IVR can actually then connect in with that appointment scheduling system and offer me an appointment. So right there in one phone call, I'm able to do a med refill, and I'm also able then to get my lab appointment completed. And then finally, I'm able then to get my prescription delivery set up for me. So whether that comes via the U.S. Postal Service or whether that comes via a more rapid delivery option, my digital AI in one call is able to connect with me on those pieces. They're also able to identify, again, based on formulary, if I may be taking a higher tier formulary drug, that there may be some cost savings opportunity for me, whether it's starting from some coupons that the digital AI is able to find from my provider, from my PBM that they're offering for me, or there's moving me to a lower tiered on my formulary that is able to bring forward some different cost savings opportunities for me as well, that I as a consumer may not be aware of, and how to really identify those. So that proactive identification and bringing that full support forward to the member to get anticipated, and I would say non-anticipated needs closed within that one phone call, man, that would go a long ways to keeping me, increasing my satisfaction with my plan.
It's a very complete patient journey. I love just the elaboration of it, because it really illustrates the complexity, but also the possibility to handle that through AI and a digital assistant, a digital agent. Very good.
Okay. Do remind people that the slides are going to be available. We did get a question about this. The slides are available in the Event Resources tab underneath the video player. So just wanted to remind folks about that. We'll go to our next question now. What would you say to an organization that is hesitant to take on a new digital agent? Sometimes people just like talking to another human being. So just curious in your thoughts there.
So the first question I'd ask in response actually is, can you scale without it in your organization? And I would wager that the answer is no. And that's the problem that really every organization is trying to solve. Between labor concerns and just the economic headwinds we have to keeping and getting the staff that we need to handle some of these functions. It requires, and I mentioned this earlier, this is why it's table stakes. It requires digitization. It requires automation of many, if not all, of the call flows that we possibly can handle, and not just call flows, but all of your engagement models. So the first question back is, can you scale without it? And let's assume you can't. Now, if you're hesitant, then that's where I'll go back to my point earlier about choosing efficiency and extraordinary, right? There's an argument for both, but if you really want to explore and do proof of value first, let's get very crisp on what is the workflow and the call flow. What is the most impactful thing we can digitize for your business that will actually make a difference to your bottom line? And once you've done that, you'll likely be more comfortable, because then you'll have proof of value to articulate and say, this is why we should go to extraordinary. This is why we should go from just what we think we know to let's explore even deeper and get innovative about it. So if you're hesitant, first question, can you scale without it? Will you fall behind? The answer is yes. Digitization is essential. We're all moving in this direction. And then secondly, okay, if we've decided we must do it and you're still hesitant, what's going to make the most impact to you? That's what we need to decide. And that's usually the conversation that I try to work through with our clients is to assess where are we in that journey and what's your perception today versus the future.
And I like thinking about it from that middle office, back office, front office type of lens, because depending on an area where you're receiving a lot of calls, that it may make sense thinking about a straight human interaction. So I just recently returned from Assembia, so I have specialty on my brain. And I know there's a lot of our specialty pharmacies or specialty pharmacy departments within PBMs that really like that white glove, thinking about our membership that is taking a specialty medication, right? They may have a number of things that are happening within their lives because of that recent diagnosis or maybe more longer term. And so there may be opportunity for that direct human interaction that may really bring forth more of a value prop. But then if we think about a middle office or a back office, how is that agent, how can that agent who's helping the member be further supported by some digital tools that we're helping them to really practice at the top end of their license? So our kind of underlying message here today is always thinking about that human plus that AI. And so it's really thinking about your business end to end. Where are those problem points, and how can the digital assistant and that human really work together to really bring out the best and really help to achieve those overall goals that you have for your organization?
Very good. I think we'll go to the next question now. Just wanted to ask if you could talk about how you manage how AI and digital assistants can work with older adults, because there are seniors that are sometimes really flummoxed by technology. Sometimes they're hesitant, just not really comfortable with this kind of technology. Could you talk about how this works with seniors?
Yeah. So the age group can definitely be an influencing factor for adoption rate. No doubt about it, right? And it's all about your perceived comfort level with technology. So the first answer to that is to make the introduction, that intake, that moment where you're first greeting that customer or patient, as simple as possible and as human-like as possible. This is where we get into sentiment and channel analysis. First is my agent successfully able to interact with my elderly population, my elderly patients, with a higher adoption rate or a high enough adoption rate that's satisfactory? And that's done through analytics of the call engagement itself and understanding what different words, phrases, and channels to change to. You're still going to have cases, regardless of age group, where people they want to talk to a person. And sometimes it's even specific to the industry. For example, I'll use myself as an example. When I want to talk to somebody about my mortgage, I want to talk to a human. However, when I want to talk to somebody about a medication refill, I'm not as tied to that. So there's a little bit of self-perception there, but analyzing the channel and the method of engagement is important to influence that adoption rate and keep that adoption score higher, and especially with your elderly patients, elderly customers. But again, simplicity is really key there. That opening moment where the patient's beginning that journey with you, it has to be intuitive, it has to be simple. You don't want to prompt them for 7 different buttons to press just to get to whatever endpoint they're trying to get to. You want Excelia or your digital assistant to have that intent recognition, and it's simple. There are fewer steps your patient has to go through, and they get to the endpoint that they needed. The more intuitive that is, the more simplistic that is for the patient or for the customer, the more success you're going to have, the higher adoption you're going to have. When you get to the moment where you're getting frustrated as a consumer, as a patient, as a customer, where you're thinking the machine's not hearing me, it's not aware of what I want, that's when you're going to get the dropout. That's when they're going to fall out and hit 0, go to your live agents. And unfortunately, at that point, they're not going to be happy talking to the live agent now. You've had a bad customer experience. So simplicity is very, very important. That upfront engagement, extremely important. That's intent recognition, sentiment analysis, and channel analysis too, to make sure we're engaging that person on the channel that they most prefer, right? Telephonic, text, email, what have you. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, as we think about our digital agents being part of our overall team, just like we wouldn't allow one of our human employees to be a poor performer, underperformer without stepping in and providing coaching, we would do the same with our digital AI. So looking at that outcomes that digital AI is getting from our population and stepping in and adjusting, providing coaching for our digital AI, as we're thinking about that as being part of our team, that's just a natural way that we would manage our workforce moving ahead. So making sure that even that digital AI is also performing at the top end of its license and really being part of that overall winning team.
Okay. Very good. Next question we've got. Where has the solution been implemented with favorable results?
Oh,
got quite a few. We could, let me ask a question in response. Let's get your contact info and talk through that, because we've got quite a few case studies we could cite here. Let me think of one I can do in 5 minutes. So let's actually talk about the clinical workflow. That's a good example where you can digitize the intake of that data, but also you have a telephonic channel for telephonic intake. So you start to put together this whole intake package where you can receive a fax, an email, a text, a telephone call. And this is interacting with providers, by the way, so not necessarily patients directly. This is an authorization workflow. And you get a really great outcome from this, because you're enabling now all things at your front door. You've got the digital front door, not to be cliche about it, but that's what you end up with. And then you start to go through that exercise. You probably heard some of my excitement earlier, where you unlock power throughout the rest of the workflow, because up front you've digitized your intake. All the data is now in a form you can use in ways that you weren't able to use that before. Start to have assisted decision making, start to do real analytics about how that workflow can be optimized and what else you should be doing. And it creates a feedback loop. And so for me, that's what success looks like, when you've created a situation where you've unlocked even more potential than what you intended. And then you're able to kind of weave together this whole orchestration of efficient and effective success in your workflow. Your clients love it. Your clinicians love it. They're having a better experience. So that's for me an example, without naming names, of where it's been successful.
And coming to my mind as well, thinking about from our contact center standpoint, whether it's a clinical contact center, pharmacist help desk, a member call center, right? Call centers fall underneath a wide variety. We're looking at those, and our clients are really looking at those as less of just a cost center and really more of a revenue center. So how are those each presenting unique opportunities to further engage our providers, further engage our members? So less of just, here's the information and move on your way, but really more about truly looking at deeper engagement models. We look at moving them from that cost center to a revenue center. So really excited about some of the early outcomes that we're seeing there in terms of adoption, and also moving towards that broader business goal as well.
Good. Next question here is, what do you think about using AI for identifying patients with a poor adherence to medication based on their refill history? And then the other question is, could that be potentially a violation of patients' privacy?
So, let me unpack it in reverse, because I think the second question is really germane to your own business, right? So AI in and of itself, if it's a solution that you have either developed or purchased and it is living within your ecosystem, you've got the proper BAAs, agreements, and everything in place, and you're respecting HIPAA and high trust, these are all essential components that we all deal with in healthcare, right? So the PHI is not necessarily a concern, right? That's about securing your data. But that data is immensely valuable. And I love the use case here. This is about medication adherence, right? This is about not just analyze. So to answer the question directly, yes, it is essential that we be doing this, because this is going to guide your patient's health outcomes, as well as their satisfaction and understanding of your engagement with them, which is a very powerful and satisfying tool for the patient to know that they've got your support. Doing that analysis, that analytics around medication adherence. Are they getting their medications on time? Are they aware that they have a medication refill coming up? Are they taking the action? Are they getting it filled? All of that is essential, but then you have to layer in the component of being proactive with the outreach. So there's two components to this. There's stochastic modeling, so machine learning models that could obviously predict and tell when a patient should be reached out to because an event is coming, or because a series of tangential events have occurred that may prompt a necessary outreach to the patient. But then you also need the function of the outreach. So again, digital assistant comes into play, because it's an outbound engagement. It's the nudge, and it's not just as simple as, the text message asking if you want to refill your medication. It's a human-like phone call who's asking perhaps a series of questions, or giving you a series of alerts, or a text message or an email, depending on the preferred channel, to get the patient's awareness around this. And the patient becomes aware of two things. They're aware that the event has happened and they need to respond. They need to react and go get their medication. But then they're also aware that you care, you're watching, you're trying to help. So again, it's essential. We should be doing that type of analytics, but we can't stop at identification. We have to continue to proactive outreach. And of course, with the PHI and the HIPAA concerns, that is germane to every business. We all have to respect that. And that will obviously be handled, in any sort of implementation, either by yourselves or with a partner. That's always going to be in the backdrop.
And I would look at it too from a lens of an SDOH. So looking at social determinants of health, and knowing that a digital AI tool can also identify things like intent recognition. So if think about as a use case where the digital agent may outreach and the member says, I can't get to my pharmacy. So it may be an access issue. They may be then ripe for a delivery. I can't afford my medication, right? So there may be then some additional opportunities that can then be presented to that member in order to help them pay for that medication. So looking at it not just from a straight, hey, you need to go get your medication. We know that you didn't take your medication, right? Thinking about that violation potential there, but really thinking about how do we service our members from a 360 perspective and ensure that we're looking and bringing in social determinants of health in order to support them more fully.
That's really interesting in terms of intervening to help the patient need, whether it's like you said, whether it's a access issue, just doesn't have reliable transportation, or affordability question as well. So
Exactly.
Excellent. We do have one other question here. If my organization is at the beginning of our digital journey, what are the first steps we can take to get started, and can EXL help with that?
We'd love to help.
Yes, we are well positioned to help. The first steps to take the journey, I'd say, and I'm obviously going to sell EXL a little bit here, but you want the right partner for that journey if you're beginning. You want to set up your own digital center of excellence with that partner. EXL is obviously well positioned to be that partner. We take that role very often, and it's to really help you get to the point through your strategy of what I talked about earlier. Where's the scale and complexity? Where does that land? Where do we place our bets? Are we talking about efficiency or extraordinary? And which direction do we take? We'll work through that with you and help prioritize, and then actually help execute on that vision. But you have to have the right partner to do it, because where a lot of organizations may fail is they don't have that alignment internally, and there's no one really trying to push or illustrate that art of the possible. So it's almost like building a car, but no one gave you the parts. Well, EXL is a partner that can bring you the parts, can bring you the expertise, and help you build the vehicle that you need.
And I'll continue the commercial for a second longer, but I think it's important to have a partner that also understands the domain expertise. So we're understanding why, if you own a mail order facility and you have that asset, why that may be important for your overall business. And thinking about those areas where there is high human interaction and where there's lots of use of homegrown systems that may be prohibiting your ability to scale, those are oftentimes a great place to begin. And not only those internal assessments, but also ensuring that you have the right partner that can really understand the industry and also understand the business.
Well, we're just about at the end of our time, but did want to ask, is there any final takeaways you'd like to leave our audience before we depart this afternoon? What would you like them to take away from this presentation?
I'll go. Yeah, I'll go first with that. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. Time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you spending some time with us today on this. I go back to the message that the digital AI is only going to continue to grow. It is here to stay, and it is becoming table stakes. And as our population continues to age, it's going to become more expected. And there are various opportunities to surprise and delight our members with the tools of our digital AI. And also thinking about our workforce. How can we surprise and delight our workforce with those tools to help their job be easier as well? Will undoubtedly bring positive outcomes for your membership and for your business.
I love that, Amy. That was very well said. The only thing I'll add to this is I hope this conversation led to some new thinking about what's possible, and to know that it is possible. And there are partners out there that can help you make these things possible. If anything you've gotten from any of the words I've said today, it's hopefully new thinking about how you do your business today and how you could do it tomorrow. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you, EXL Health. Thank you, Amy and Chris. This was a really fascinating presentation. It kind of flew by on us, but covered a lot of ground, and I think probably inspired a lot of interesting thinking. So thanks for joining us here at PBMI. Once again, if there's part of the webinar you missed, it will be available for on-demand viewing at the PBMI website. That's pbmi.com. It'll be under the webinar section. So thanks very much for joining us. For PBMI and MJH Life Sciences, I'm Ron Southwick. Thank you very much. Have a good day.